The most important thing, don't panic. Trust your product. If there is something that you've been using for a long time, it's probably safe. When you have problems, your body will tell you right away. Trust your body. If you have a rash from something, don't say, oh no, maybe it's not that product. No, it's that product. It's the new thing you started using. If you have an upset tummy, it's the new product you started consuming. Welcome to Neurify and Beautify, the podcast that show you the other side of beauty. Every week, we interview an expert in the world of beauty, wellness, and health, so that you can make an informed decisions that are right for you. My name is Nour Abochama.
And I'm Linda Yates. Today's guest is a leading voice in the world of cosmetic and health product testing. With a background in chemical engineering from Polytechnique, France, she has spent her career ensuring the highest standards of safety and quality in the products we use and consume every day. Her hands-on expertise and commitment to consumer protection make her a powerful advocate for transparency in the health, beauty, and wellness industries. She's done so much behind the scenes work in this field, and now she wants to educate consumers so they can make informed and, most importantly, safe decisions when it comes to what products they buy. Our guest, if you hadn't already guessed, is my amazing co-host, Nour Abochama. And so, Nour, let's just jump into the interview. Nour, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show as a host, of course, but also as a guest. How does it feel to be on the other side of the interview?
Oh, this is the second time I hear that question. It's always hard to switch seats.
It is definitely hard to switch seats. So I'm really looking forward to learning from you and really picking your brain today and getting some of the questions that I have, because it seems like it's more important than ever to shed some light on the world of product testing. People need to understand what goes into creating products that they've been buying to improve their lives, whether it's their health or their looks or how they feel in general.
So, product testing, it's a question that's been raised long time ago. Before there was no regulations, neither in pharmaceutical world or, of course, beauty and nutraceutical world. So things been kind of experimental for a while until the FDA came into the play. And we started putting some rules. We started with the pharmaceuticals, but then it's expanded to all other kind of products, including health and wellness products. Testing is something fascinating because you can know what goes into these products exactly. Testing actually starts from the stage of creating the products. So when we start formulating the products, first we need to test our raw materials. We need to test everything goes into the product, and then we need to test early stages of product development, early stages of formulation, just to make sure there is nothing wrong with it. There is what we need to put is exactly what we have. That's one side of the testing. You have the other side of the testing, which is the preclinical, and that goes to the toxicity of your products, just to make sure that there is nothing toxic for the human being. And this been mainly focused on the pharmaceutical products, less of the beauty and health. So starting on testing, you dive into the ocean and you need to know where you want to go.
Wow. It sounds like that ocean is really big. So I'm curious, what got you interested in chemical engineering and product testing in the first place? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
It started in school. So we had like lab hours in school. I was maybe in seventh or sixth grade, and it felt like magic, changing colors, changing state of the materials. I started there, and actually, I wanted to be a pharmacologist.
Oh,
But
interesting.
at a certain point, I'm like, oh, it's not really the pharmacology that I like, it's how to create the product that I want.
Mm.
So that's how I moved into the engineering. Chemical engineering is something really about how to create the products. But then I
Mhm.
worked in testing the products, which is a little bit far from chemical engineering. But you need to have a deep understanding of both to be
Mhm.
able to test products. So my fascination of chemistry started in school, and it's still until today. So I love it when we have a research project, which we get a lot as
Mhm.
service lab, because that's where you need really to separate different compounds to know what goes into the product, how to isolate, how to extract. And that's a lot of magic, actually.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of magic. And that's awesome. I love how you describe that magic. So for product to be sold at a big box store, are they required to go through some form of testing? And what if someone is just making products at home and selling them at a farmer's market or say Etsy?
Okay, so here in the United States, the regulations are different. For natural health products and beauty products, our regulations are not as strict as for pharmaceutical products.
Mhm.
So if you are gonna grab like a multivitamin from the pharmacy, or I don't know, a foundation that has an SPF or any other kind of products, you need to understand that it doesn't go through the same process as a prescription drug.
Mhm.
So we don't have as strict regulations as the prescription drugs, but there is kind of regulations. Let's say the minimum. So that you're gonna have to make sure that there is no contamination in microbiology. There is a certain level of heavy metals. There is no pesticides. There is no residual solvents.
Mhm.
Residual solvents is the residual of the soap that we use or the clinic products that we use in the big manufacturing facilities. So we
Mhm.
need to make sure there is no cross contamination in products. At the
Yeah.
same
Okay.
time, when you have a product that claims, for example, that this is a facial cream with vitamin A
Mhm.
or with hyaluronic acid, and they say, for example, there is this percentage of this ingredient, well, they need to prove that there is this percentage. So we make sure that the label claim is what they claiming.
Mhm.
So there is regulation in place for this kind of things, but there isn't a regulation to make sure, for example, that they put all the herbal that they claim are in there.
Mm. Mhm.
It's not as strict as pharmaceutical, but it's getting there. It's getting really. Every year there is an update on the regulation, and those updates are very important to keep up with. Now you have the big companies, they have their own internal rules, and
Mhm.
usually they are much more strict than the small guy. There is the people who would prepare products in their home and they sell it in the farmers market, for example.
Mhm.
There is no control on them.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
less to no control on them. We need to make sure where we get our products from. I'm not saying that those people they have
Mhm.
like bad products. No, sometimes they have really really good ones.
Uh-huh.
What I'm saying, there is no control on that. So
Gotcha.
we don't know what's happening in there. I personally wouldn't risk it.
Uh-huh.
I would really
Okay.
go with with something from the pharmacy. You have the big online seller like Amazon, for example. They do have their own regulations. So it's
Mhm.
harder to sell through Amazon than to go buy from the farmer's market. There is a lot going on, but I have to say that regulations are catching up and things are getting much better than before. In the beauty industry, it's getting really regulated, but in the
Mhm.
wellness industry, we're still getting there.
It's not. Oh, that's interesting. So who is the regulator?
FDA.
The
It's
FDA.
the Food
Okay.
and Drug Administration in the United States. Yes. They have
Okay.
a special department for natural health product and another
Mhm.
department for cosmetics. So now for a lab, for example, to do cosmetic testing, we have a special license that we need to order from the FDA. For the manufacturers, there isn't a lot to do. It's just there is, let's say, regular checking of the product in the market. So they would go get the products, test it, and if there is a problem, they will recall all the product from the market.
I see. Wow, that's very fascinating. All the hoops and the angles and everything that you got to go through it. That's crazy. So, how do businesses advertise that their products are even safe and meet those regulations? And are there specific labels people can look for when they're buying products?
Now we have two parts here. You have the products that are manufactured in the United States. So those ones, we have FDA regulations and they need to go through it. There is a registration and they need to register their product through the FDA. We don't have as much regulation on testing and auditing those guys, but we do on the product themselves. So they cannot claim something that is not in the product. The labels are very strict. The form of the labels is very strict, and we cannot put something in the label that we don't have a third party confirmation that this is true, that what they're claiming is true. And here where the third party testing companies come in place. And you have then the products that are exported from other countries, even if the company is US based. Some of them, they do the manufacturing outside. Here, when we bring in the product, we have more control. So before clearing the product in the custom, we need the testing certificates to be in place. We need all the claim certificates to be in place. We need to see what we call the batch records of manufacturing facilities. We need the certification of the manufacturing facilities. So all that need to come with the product. So we have more, it's more established for the product coming from outside.
So very fascinating, right? There's so much that goes into it,
There
into
is a
every
lot to
little
go
thing,
into it.
right? So what happens if a product fails to meet those regulations? And has that ever happened to a product that you were testing?
It does. And it does more often than you think it would be. There is it fails the specifications more than the regulation, because the regulation is related to the specification of the product. Specification of a product is the label claim of the product. So let's say a company manufacture a multivitamin. In the multivitamin, we have vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin D. We have 500 milligram of vitamin C. We have 30,000 unit of vitamin D, and we have 10,000 unit of vitamin A. Now, before we release that product to the market, we need to test it and make sure that what we're claiming is in this lot. So we do the testing for each single lot, just to make sure that every process we're doing, every product we're releasing is within the specification of the product. Now, you have two kinds of failing the specification. We have when the product is new. So when the product is new, sometimes you have excipients that could interfere or mask your active ingredients. So the testing itself can detect that active ingredients. So when we test it, it fails, even though they did put that active in them in the product. In this case, we have two options. Either we go into the formulation, so we need to change the excipients that are masking that active ingredients, or we go to a method development. So we change our extraction method in the lab, so we'll be able to get to separate that active ingredients from the excipient that is masking it. We call this method development and method validation. Once it's set up, it will work for the product. Now, if it doesn't work, here we need to go change a formulation. That's one kind of failing specification. We have another kind of failing specification is what we call contamination. So the contamination, it means, for example, during the process of manufacturing, we used a water that is not within the US specification, or that we had a contamination. So we get a microbiological contamination, total aerobic count, total yeast and mold, or another kind of pathogens. Here, there is nothing to do. We need to take all the products and we sterilize the products. We go under
Mhm.
UV. So that's something that the manufacturer need to do. And then we retest and we make
Mhm.
sure that that process did sterilize the product and we have no
Mhm.
more contamination in it. Here we have procedures in each company that is
Mhm.
related to the product itself, and they can tell us what's going on in there. So they need to do that, and they send the samples again to the testing facility. So we make sure that there is no contamination. Sometimes you have to just destroy the whole lot.
Wow.
Sometimes we cannot kill the bacteria or we cannot eliminate the contamination, and you need to destroy the whole lot. It happens
Mhm.
more than you
What
think.
Oh, what then is that time frame? I mean, how long does that all kind of take? Is that like months, weeks, days, of what
So,
you're
what we call a revision, which means we have a contamination, or we cannot see, or we see our specification is 10,000 and we see only 7,000, for example.
Mhm.
So, the manufacturer can add for the active ingredients and retest. Now, the testing itself, it takes a week. A
Mm,
revision, it depends on the company and their
I see.
policy. It could
I see.
take few days. It could take maybe 2-3 weeks is the maximum I've seen. Because after
Wow.
that, you cannot leave like the whole lot without packing,
Uh-huh.
without going to the packaging, and you cannot just leave it in the storage area. It needs
Wow.
to go through a specific process. And the whole thing, like let's say if you have an out of specification, it could take from a week to a month maximum.
That would definitely slow that getting to market for sure.
It
So yeah.
does, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
And that's why
consumers
sometimes you have like an out of stock problem for some products.
Mhm.
Like remember when we
Oh.
had the out of stock problem for the formula infants, because
Uh-huh.
there was a big contamination in the
Oh
main
wow.
formula manufacturing facility. And we realized that we don't have enough manufacturing facilities for formulas. That
Uh-huh.
was a big one. I remember I was pregnant and I was about to have my twins when there was no more formula in the market, and
Wow.
everyone was fighting to have the boxes of formula. I started
Mhm.
buying formulas even before having birth, and without realizing there is different kind of formulas, and I need to wait until the doctor tells me which one we need to use. That was a big
Yeah.
panic. And I remember we had a shortage of insulin once as well,
Wow. Hmm. Hmm.
also
Yeah.
because of contamination in the main manufacturing facility.
So consumers today have some very real concerns about their health and beauty products because thanks to product testing, sometimes we find out their product's been trusted, as you just kind of mentioned, aren't as safe as we thought. We saw that in the summer of 2024 when the study on heavy metals in tampons came out and news outlets everywhere were reporting that lead and arsenic were found in well-known brands of tampons. So that's a pretty scary thing. I'm past that, but that would have freaked me out. I must admit. The scientists who conducted this study, they've reported that we still don't know whether those metals are actually harming consumers because more testing needs to be done. But all the same, it's fair that consumers are concerned. And I think it leads to people not trusting big companies to put their safety first. How should consumers handle that? And should we be pushing for more regulations and testing? And
we
how can
should
regular people call for that sort of thing?
we should be pushing for more regulation and testing, of course, especially for the contaminant testing. So heavy
Hmm.
metals, microbiology, pesticides, PCBs, dioxinference, residual solvents, those things our body don't know how to deal with them,
Hmm.
and they just keep them somewhere either in the liver or in our kidneys or wherever, and suddenly we
Wow.
have cancers, we have
Uh-huh.
like diseases that we don't understand why we have them. It's just
Hmm.
because we are consuming products that our body doesn't know how to handle. More regulation is always, always, always
Hmm.
a good place to start. More
Hmm.
testing is a good place to start, but also trying to be as healthy as possible.
Mm-hmm.
trying to use as organic as possible, trying. It's hard, I know that, but
Uh-huh.
it's a way to start. More regulation, more testing, that's like a two-sided subject,
Mm-hmm.
because having more testing, it's always good, but we need a fundamental studies.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, lead in tampons. How did they think about that? Why would they think about testing that? You would never think that there is lead in such a product.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we had a melanin in formula as well for a certain point. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a big contamination that you don't know
Mm-hmm.
where is it coming from. Well, that's cheating, kind of, but you have it. There was a lead in lipstick. For a while, we
Mm-hmm.
had a lead contamination in the lipsticks. Now
Mm-hmm.
you have some states that are more regulated than others, like California, for example, where I live. We have a lot of regulation. I would love for other states to adopt those regulations. Honestly, not because it's not more business for some industries, it's just more safety for the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
We have the right to use a healthy products to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that at least the food we're eating doesn't contain mercury.
Mm-hmm. Sure. No,
Yeah.
that's yeah. Wow. So ultimately, I know your goal, and our goal with this podcast is to help people make safe decisions for themselves and their families. So how do you personally decide what products you're going to buy? How do you go through that process?
I have unfair advantage. I have an insider look, but honestly, I use the least products possible and I
Mm-hmm.
use the most organic possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I use big brands
Mm-hmm.
just personally because I know that they have more regulation inside regulation, like their
Mm-hmm.
regulation. They're more strict than the federal regulation.
I
So
gotcha.
I do that honestly,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time I try, for example, for my kids to use as natural as possible.
Okay, that makes sense. So is there anything else you want consumers to know when they're researching whether or not to use a certain product, treatment, or supplement?
I would say the most important thing: don't panic. Trust your
Mm,
product. If there is something that you've been using for a long time, it's probably safe.
mhm,
When you have problems, your body will tell you right away. Trust your body. If you have a rash from something, don't say, oh no, maybe it's not that product. No, it's that product. It's the new
mhm,
thing you started using. If you have an upset tummy, it's the new product you started consuming.
mm,
Not always a big brand is the right way to go,
mhm,
but maybe it's the safe way to go. There is a lot of companies that would put out their testing certificate on the website. I've mentioned that before, I'll mention that again. Those,
mhm,
even if they're not big companies, they do care about their product and they do care about their consumers' trust. I'd
mhm,
say go with these guys. They care. Try to find the guys that they really care and they will show you that they care
mhm,
better than the ones they just want to sell you their products.
mhm. Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
trust your body. Your body will tell
Mhm.
you.
Oh, I love that. So Nora, thank you so much for sharing with all of us and our audience. I know we've barely scratched the surface here and it sounds so intricate and complex. But I feel like this will really help all of our listeners know what they're getting themselves into, whether they choose to buy products they see in the store or online or at a local small business too, as you talked about organic.
Yep. Well, it's always good to use something organic. It's always good to trust what you've been using, what your mom have been using, what your sister have been using. Always try to build trust in the products that you are using and pass this information to the other people. Again, if it's good for you, it doesn't mean it's good for your friends. We all have
Mhm,
a unique bodies and unique needs. And it's good to figure out what's good for you. And trial and fail, maybe it's the safest way to go. I know it's risky, but life is risky. And as my mom always said, well, life is a chronic disease that ends with death. So just enjoy your life. Don't think a lot about it.
Oh, wow. Thank you again for letting me pick your brain. That was really a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
Nour, that was such a great interview. It's always so much fun to talk with you. And my big takeaway was listen to your body and see how your body's reacting, and really kind of check in with yourself. And I also love the fact that you said, if your mother, if your sister, if your aunt was using a product, then that's probably going to be a safe product for you. I love that. I love that legacy too. That was really powerful.
Always it goes back to life itself. As I say always, we do the best we can to protect ourselves, but our fear shouldn't overcome our joy of life. So just do whatever feels right. I know that the regulations are here. We need to push for more regulation. That's always good. But also enjoy life. Use the products so you will feel better. And that's what matters really.
I really agree that we should definitely enjoy life. So we want to thank you all for listening to this episode of Nourify and Beautify, where we show you the other side of beauty. We hope you enjoyed this episode and you'll subscribe or follow the podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you want more information about us or to read our blog, check us out at nourify-beautify.com.
Nourify and Beautify is produced by TSE Studios and our music is from Soundstrip. If you haven't been over to our YouTube channel, you can watch our interviews there as well. And we'd love it if you would leave us a comment while you were at it. My name is Nour Abochama.
And I'm Linda Yates. We'll be back next week with another great episode of Nourify and Beautify. See you then.